His profile seemed like the usual. Decent photos, vaguely funny captions, the kind that promised charm without being overwhelming. When he messaged me, his words were casual, easy to read, and I liked that he didn't overthink responses. After a few days of chatting, he suggested we meet for coffee at a small cafe he liked downtown. I figured it would be normal, low pressure, and agreed. The cafe was dim but cozy, with exposed brick walls and mismatched furniture. When I arrived, he was already there, sitting at a corner table with a half-empty cup of coffee, scrolling on his phone. He stood up, smiled, and gestured for me to sit. At first, everything felt normal. He was polite, attentive, and surprisingly witty in person. He asked questions, laughed at my jokes, and didn't seem pushy about anything. I started relaxing, thinking this might actually go well. After about an hour of chatting, he suggested we take a walk. It was spring, the streets wet from an afternoon drizzle, the smell of asphalt and blooming flowers mixing in the air. He said he wanted to show me something unique, a place he discovered years ago. It sounded harmless enough, just a short walk away. I followed, not noticing how quiet the streets had become, the occasional passerby giving us sideways glances. We arrived at a narrow, unmarked door tucked between two older buildings. He unlocked it with a key he kept on a chain around his neck, and we stepped inside. The interior was dark, musty, and surprisingly large. Walls lined with shelves and display cases, the floor covered with worn rugs that muffled our footsteps. I assumed it was some private gallery or collector's room. He smiled, telling me he loved oddities and personal collections. I didn't think much of it at first. Then he started showing me around, pointing to small boxes, jars, even picture frames. At first, the items seemed harmless. Trinkets, jewelry, small souvenirs. Then I noticed tiny notes attached to each item, written in meticulous handwriting. The notes weren't about history or origin. They described people. My stomach sank when I realized the notes weren't generic. They were detailed observations, psychological notes about habits, reactions, emotional triggers. He explained he liked to study people to understand them. He emphasized that he kept these collections from previous dates, each labeled with a date, a location, and the person's name. I froze. Every trinket, every note, every little item belonged to someone he had dated, observed, and cataloged. He wasn't showing me a quirky collection. He was showing me evidence of obsession, methodical tracking of every interaction. My mind raced. The polite man I had met at the cafe was someone entirely different here, someone meticulous and detached, someone who had spent years documenting people's lives in ways that were deeply personal and invasive. He walked me past rows of shelves, wallets, watches, earrings, even clothing items, all carefully displayed. The notes were unsettling. He described reactions, moods, what people revealed in conversations, weaknesses, things they never told anyone. The handwriting was neat, almost clinical, yet the content was intimate and disturbing. My pulse quickened, my hands shook slightly as I realized how organized and obsessive this was. He noticed my discomfort but didn't stop. Instead, he smiled wider and said it was part of the experience, that he liked to see how people reacted when confronted with the reality of being observed, analyzed, cataloged. He explained that some of the notes were written after years of following people online and offline, sometimes months of subtle interaction before an item ended up in his museum. I tried to keep calm, thinking maybe I could leave, but the room was more like a labyrinth than a single space. Hallways of shelves stretched out in angles that didn't make sense, creating corners I hadn't noticed. Every turn revealed more items, more notes, more evidence of meticulous tracking. It was overwhelming. The thought of how many people he had studied, how carefully he had documented them, made my head spin. He guided me to a small room at the back, the lighting dimmer, the air heavier. In this room, the collections were more personal. Handwritten letters, personal keepsakes, even photos taken discreetly. He told me he kept this room for the most interesting personalities, the ones who challenged him, made him think differently. As he spoke, I felt like I was being evaluated, analyzed, a new subject in a room of ghosts and remnants. My phone was in my bag back in the cafe room, out of reach. He explained that he preferred in-person observation, that the devices people carried could distort reality. I realized then that I was trapped in the museum, both physically and psychologically. Each object, each note was a reminder that I could be next, that my reactions, habits, and even subtle expressions would be documented and cataloged. He showed me one last section, the most meticulously arranged. Items lined up like trophies, each tagged with dates, names, and a paragraph of psychological insight. I could feel my pulse in my ears as I understood that I had been lured into this space, not just for a date, but as part of an ongoing collection. The casual charm, the laughter, the easy conversation, it had all been a prelude to this revelation. The walls seemed to close in as he talked, detailing patterns, behaviors, and tendencies. My mind raced with questions about consent, about privacy, about how many people had walked into this museum unknowingly. He explained that the museum was his way of studying humanity, of understanding connections, of feeling control. The casual explanation did nothing to ease the dread that filled me. I needed to leave. I told myself it was enough, that this was the end of the date. He didn't resist, but watched me carefully as I made my way toward the exit. The hallways twisted, the floor uneven, and it felt like the museum was alive, breathing, observing my every step. Finally, I reached the door, stepped out into the damp street, and didn't look back. The city was quiet, too quiet, streets empty in ways that felt staged. I walked home fast, trying to shake off the sensation that someone was cataloging my every movement. The museum stayed in my mind, a vivid, invasive image, rows of shelves filled with reminders of people's private lives, meticulously labeled, stored, and studied. Even days later, I couldn't stop thinking about the objects, the notes, the man who collected them. Every time I saw someone leaving a cafe, or a couple holding hands, or a backpack left unattended, my mind drew connections to the museum. The idea of charm masking obsession, of a dating profile leading to a personal archive of someone's life, made every swipe online feel dangerous. I deleted the app after that, avoiding casual interactions, avoiding strangers who seemed perfect. The memory of the museum, of that carefully curated collection, is permanent. I think about the people who never realized they were studied, whose items now sit behind glass in a dim room somewhere, and the man who made that possible still walks around, charming, polite, harmless in public. It terrifies me, the thought that anyone who seems normal could be part of something structured, obsessive, and deeply personal. And I can't stop thinking that maybe the next person he targets, the next item in his museum, could be anyone, including someone I know. The first time I saw the photo, I thought it was a joke someone made using my pictures. Like one of those fake couple edits people do when they're bored. I almost laughed when I saw it, because it looked convincing at first glance, but the more I stared at it, the less funny it got. It was me, standing next to her. Both of us smiling like we'd known each other for a while. And the worst part was, it looked completely normal. Not edited, not stitched together, not anything like that. The lighting matched, the shadows matched, even the way my arm was positioned looked natural, like I'd actually been there. But I hadn't. I hadn't even met her yet. I matched with her 2 days before that. Her profile stood out because it was almost empty. Barely any photos, no linked accounts, nothing flashy. Her bio was just a couple lines about how she didn't like social media and preferred real conversations. That's what made me swipe. It felt different from everyone else trying too hard. We started talking, and she actually stuck to that. She didn't bring up followers or apps or anything like that. If anything, she seemed almost annoyed by it. She said she didn't post much and didn't really care about that stuff. So seeing that photo made no sense. I found it by accident. One of my friends sent me a screenshot late at night, asking if I had a girlfriend I forgot to mention. I opened it expecting something dumb, but then I saw it. Her account. Public. And right at the top was that photo. The caption made it worse. It described a day we hadn't had yet. Walking through a part of town I recognized, grabbing food from a place I go to sometimes, sitting somewhere with a view. It was detailed. Too detailed. Like it was written after the fact, not made up. I went straight to her profile from the app. She hadn't mentioned it at all. Our messages were still normal, talking about meeting up later that week. Nothing weird. I clicked on her social account again. There were more photos. Not just that one. A few others. All of us together, in different places. One of us sitting outside a cafe. One of us walking down a street at night. One where I was looking at her instead of the camera, like someone caught a moment. I checked the dates. They were all posted earlier that day, before I even woke up. I felt this weird mix of confusion and something heavier I couldn't explain, like my brain was trying to reject what I was seeing, but couldn't find a reason to. I'd opened one of the photos and zoomed in. It wasn't just me standing there. It was me doing specific things. In one of them, I was holding a drink I always order. In another, I was wearing a jacket I actually own. Even the way my hair looked was accurate for that day. It wasn't random. It matched real details. I went back to our chat. Nothing about any of this. No mention of photos. No hint that she even used social media. I asked her about it. Kept it simple. Tried not to sound like I was freaking out. She replied after a few minutes. And what she said didn't help. She didn't deny it. She just said she doesn't really use it much. Like that explained anything. I stared at my phone for a while after that. Then I did something I probably shouldn't have done. I kept scrolling her account. Older posts. That's when it got worse. There were photos of her with other guys. Same style. Same kind of captions. Like full days documented. But something about them felt off. I clicked into one. The guy looked normal. But when I looked closer, his face felt wrong. Not distorted. Just slightly off in a way I couldn't place. Like it was close to real but not fully there. I went to another post. Different guy. Same feeling. And then I noticed something that made my stomach drop. In the background of one of those photos, there was a place I recognized. Not from her posts. From real life. A spot near where I live. Not common landmark either. Just a random street corner. I checked the date on that post. It was from weeks ago. Before I even matched with her. I went back to our messages again. Read through everything more carefully this time. Looking for anything I missed. There were small things. Tiny details she mentioned about places she liked. They matched the photos. But at the time, they didn't stand out. Now they did. It felt like she already had a timeline. Like everything was planned before I was even part of it. My phone buzzed. Another message from her. This time, she sent a photo. Not from her account. Directly to me. It was another picture of us. Different from the ones I'd seen. This one looked like it was taken indoors. Maybe an apartment. I was sitting on a couch. She was next to me. Both of us looking at something off camera. It looked casual. Real. Like it wasn't posed. I dropped my phone on the bed for a second. Just stared at it. Then picked it up again. Zoomed in. Everything looked consistent. No signs of editing. No weird edges. Nothing. I checked the background. I recognized the room. Not exactly, but it looked like a layout similar to my place. That made my chest tighten. I stood up and looked around my room. Everything was normal. But now I couldn't stop comparing it to the photo. Trying to find matches. Angles. Details. My phone buzzed again. Another message. Another photo. This one was outside. Same street as one of her posts. Me walking next to her. Mid-step. Like it was taken without me noticing. I started feeling like I was falling behind something. Like there was a version of events happening somewhere that I wasn't part of yet. And somehow it was already documented. I checked the time. It wasn't even the day we were supposed to meet yet. That's when I looked back at the captions on her posts. The one from earlier. The one describing the day we hadn't had. I read it again. Slower this time. And I realized something. It wasn't just describing random things. It was describing a plan. Specific places. Specific order. Like a schedule. I opened my Maps app. Looked at the locations she mentioned. They were all real. And all close enough to actually do in one day. My heart started racing again, but this time it felt different. Less confusion. More like I understood what was going on, just not how. It felt like she already knew how the day would go. Like it already happened somewhere. And the photos were proof of that version. My phone buzzed again. I didn't want to open it, but I did. Another message. No text. Just a photo. This one was taken at night. The last place mentioned in her caption. Me standing under a streetlight. Looking straight at the camera. My expression looked tired, like it was the end of a long day. I stared at it for a long time, because something about it felt different from the others. It didn't feel like a happy photo. It felt like the end of something. I checked the timestamp. Posted a few minutes ago. I hadn't even met her yet. I closed the app. Sat there for a while. Then I opened our chat again. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I didn't know what to say, because it felt like anything I typed was already part of that timeline somewhere. I locked my phone instead, set it down, and just sat there, trying to decide if I should still meet her, because part of me felt like I didn't have a choice. Like that day was already set, already posted, already real somewhere. My phone buzzed one more time. I didn't check it. I already knew it would be another photo, probably one I hadn't lived yet. Honestly, I was tired of swiping through faces that looked nothing like the photos. Her profile was simple, messy bun, oversized hoodie, cluttered bookshelf in the background. The bio said she loved animals and long walks. Nothing alarming, nothing unusual. Her messages were funny and casual, not over the top, so I matched with her without thinking too much. We set up a date at a small bistro in a part of the city I didn't normally go to. The place was dim, candles on each table, a faint smell of garlic and basil lingering. She arrived on time, wearing a vintage leather jacket and carrying a bag that looked heavy, like it had been living a life of its own. The first thing I noticed was her smile. It wasn't just polite, it was like she was genuinely excited to be there. We sat, ordered coffee, talked about movies, music, life stuff, normal first date things. It was easy too easy. I started thinking maybe the app actually worked for once. Then she leaned over, whispering, or at least I thought she did, and said she needed to introduce me to someone. I laughed nervously, thinking it was a friend she had brought along, but the moment she pulled the zipper on her bag, I froze. Inside was a fully grown raccoon. It had a black mask across its eyes and tiny, dexterous hands clutching the edge of the bag. It blinked at me and chattered in a way that sounded almost like words. She explained casually that the raccoon lived with her, had been rescued from somewhere she wouldn't specify, and it insisted on being part of every conversation. I laughed awkwardly at first, thinking she was joking, but then the raccoon climbed out of the bag and settled in the chair opposite me, tail flicking, eyes sharp. It started making little noises whenever I spoke, moving closer when I got animated, retreating when I paused. She seemed completely normal with this. She handed it a tiny espresso cup, which it ignored, and it began chattering again, almost conversationally, like it was contributing opinions to the date. The night progressed, and I realized I couldn't escape its presence. At first, I tried pretending it wasn't there, focusing on her, thinking maybe it would calm down. But it didn't. It followed our every movement, mimicked gestures, occasionally knocking over utensils just to remind me it was there. People at other tables glanced, some whispered, but she acted like it was normal. She introduced me to it by name, explained its favorite foods, its quirks, even its opinions about certain movies. She treated it like a roommate, a friend, a fully sentient member of her household, which in hindsight, it probably was. After dinner, we walked through a park nearby. She carried a small backpack that seemed impossibly light for holding a full-grown raccoon. I assumed it was in there, but then it scampered ahead of us, leaping from branch to branch in trees along the path, eyes fixed on me, tail flicking like it was judging. She laughed at my startled reaction, completely unbothered. She talked about her life as if this raccoon had always been there, and maybe in a way it had. Every story, every past event, seemed to include the animal as if it had been shaping her choices, her personality, her entire world. The thing that got under my skin wasn't the raccoon itself. It was how much attention it demanded, how aware it seemed of me, how it seemed to notice the smallest expressions, the tiniest changes in tone. When I smiled, it smiled back, too deliberately. When I tried to gesture or explain something, it interrupted with a chittering noise that almost sounded like commentary. It was too intentional. I kept thinking maybe I was imagining the intelligence behind its movements, but the way it mirrored my posture, the timing of its noises, made it impossible to ignore. We eventually ended up at her apartment. The door opened, and the raccoon bolted inside like it owned the place, leaping onto the counter, inspecting the fridge, knocking over mugs like a tiny inspector. The apartment was a mix of cozy clutter and organized chaos, piles of books, scattered clothes, half-finished art projects. But every area seemed designed for the raccoon's comfort as much as hers. There were small hammocks, tiny shelves, even a little blanket nest that looked absurdly plush for an animal of its size. She moved around it like it was an extension of her body, reaching over it, adjusting things, apologizing if it got in my way like it was her main priority. I sat on the couch, trying to process everything. She brought over a blanket for me, which the raccoon immediately claimed, sitting on my lap, paws kneading gently. I froze, heart racing. She apologized, laughing softly, explaining it had a habit of bonding with new people quickly. I nodded, trying to act casual, but my mind was racing. This was not what I had signed up for. Yet at the same time, she was magnetic, the raccoon a bizarre sort of charm, and I couldn't leave without seeming rude or freaked out. The night dragged on. The raccoon became increasingly vocal, chattering, occasionally tugging at my sleeves, sniffing my hair, nudging me toward the couch cushions or food items. She fed it little snacks, which it accepted with dignity, then returned to staring at me like it was evaluating. She told stories about its early life, rescue attempts, how it had adapted to living with humans. All while the raccoon made noises of agreement or dissent at the appropriate moments. It was uncanny. More than once, I caught myself thinking it understood every word I said. By the time I left, I was exhausted, not just tired, but drained, like the raccoon had consumed more than my attention. It had consumed my mental space, my comfort zone. She walked me to the door, raccoon perched on her shoulder, tail curling around her neck. She waved, laughing, promising to text soon. I nodded, stepped out, and immediately felt the quiet of the street without the chittering presence. It was relief, but also a hollow sort of unease, as if part of me had left behind something I didn't understand. Over the next few days, I tried to contact her, but my messages went unanswered. I checked the app, hoping maybe we could set up another date, but the profile was gone, deleted, vanished. I thought maybe I had imagined everything. But then small things started happening. Shadows flickered in the corner of my vision. Noises in the apartment building, scratches, faint chittering, though no one else lived above or below me. I would dream of raccoon eyes staring at me from dark corners, tail flicking, paws moving as if mimicking my gestures. Eventually, I stopped using the app, stopped dating entirely. The image of her in that raccoon stayed with me, persistent and impossible to shake. Sometimes, in the quiet of my apartment, I could swear I heard a soft chittering, just on the edge of hearing, almost like a reminder. She and the raccoon existed, somewhere, maybe watching, maybe judging, maybe waiting for the next conversation, the next date, the next person to test its uncanny presence. I never got a clear explanation of why she lived with a fully grown raccoon, why it seemed so aware, why it demanded participation. But I realized quickly that it wasn't about logic. It was about the way she and that animal operated together, a symbiosis that left anyone new feeling off balance, watched, and somehow complicit in the strange world. Now, even months later, I can't look at raccoons the same way. The images online, the videos of them climbing garbage cans, their tiny hands and masked faces, it all triggers a memory of that date. I can't shake the way it moved, how it seemed to follow my thoughts, how it made me aware of my own reactions like a mirror with claws. Dating apps feel dangerous in a way I never understood, and every time my phone buzzes with a new match, I hesitate, thinking about the pair of eyes that had silently judged me over coffee, over dinner, over a night I can't unsee. The world suddenly felt smaller after that night. It was a presence, a measuring stick for reality, and the fact that I had survived the date intact felt like luck more than skill. I didn't think anything of it at first, which is probably the worst part looking back. It started like every other dumb late-night swipe session when I couldn't sleep and had nothing better to do. I remember I was just laying there scrolling, half paying attention, when her profile popped up. Not even in a dramatic way, just another face in the stack. But I stopped. It wasn't even that she looked unreal or anything like that. She just looked normal in a way that felt rare on those apps. Messy hair in one photo, oversized hoodie in another, sitting on the floor with a coffee cup in one where the lighting was kinda bad. It didn't look staged. It looked real. And yeah, she was pretty, but not in a way that screamed fake profile. I swiped right without thinking much about it. We matched almost instantly. That should have been the first thing that felt off, but it didn't. I just figured she was on her phone at the same time. We started messaging, and it felt easy, like weirdly easy. She didn't take forever to reply, but she also wasn't glued to the chat. The pace felt normal. She didn't ask anything weird either, just basic stuff. What I did for work, what music I liked, dumb little things. I remember feeling like I got lucky for once. After maybe an hour of talking, she asked for my number. I gave it to her. Again, no hesitation. We moved to texting, and that's when things started getting a little strange, but still not enough for me to stop. She started sending photos. Not like anything bad, just random snaps of her day. One of her sitting on her bed with her laptop, another of her holding a mug, one of her shoes kicked off near a couch. Just casual stuff. It felt normal, like she was trying to make it more real than just texting. I sent a couple back too. Nothing special. Just my desk at work, my car, stuff like that. I work late shifts, so most of this was happening while I was at work. I remember checking my phone during a break when she sent the first photo that actually made me pause. It was a picture of a kitchen. At first glance, it didn't even register. Just a counter, a sink, a kettle. Normal. But something about it stuck in my head. I stared at it longer than I needed to. Then I shrugged it off. A lot of kitchens look the same. I even told myself that while I went back to work. We kept talking. She sent another photo maybe 20 minutes later. This one was of a living room, a couch, a coffee table, a tab on the wall. The lighting looked dim, like it was late afternoon or early evening. Again, nothing crazy. But this time I felt it stronger. That weird feeling like I'd seen it before. I zoomed in on the photo. The table had a scratch in the corner. The couch had this small dent in one of the cushions. I had that exact dent in my couch. I remember just staring at my phone, feeling kind of stupid, like I was trying to convince myself of something that wasn't there. I even opened my camera roll and looked at an old photo I had in my living room. It looked similar, but not exactly the same. I told myself I was reaching. I put my phone away and tried to ignore it. Then she sent another one. This time was a hallway. Narrow, with a coat hanging on a hook, a pair of shoes on the floor near the wall. My chest dropped. Those were my shoes. Not just the same kind. Mine. Same scuffs on the sides, same worn-out laces. I didn't even realize I'd stopped breathing for a second. I just sat there staring at it while everything started clicking together in the worst way. I went back to the kitchen photo. Then the living room. I started noticing things I missed before. The exact pattern on the counter. The small chip on the wall near the tea. Stuff I'd never paid attention to until that moment. It was my apartment. Every single photo she sent was taken inside my apartment, while I was at work. I remember checking the time. I still had 2 hours left on my shift. My hands felt cold and I couldn't think straight. I wanted to believe there was some explanation that didn't involve someone being inside my place. Maybe old photos. Maybe she used to live there. That was the only thing that made any sense. I asked her about it. I tried to keep it casual, like I wasn't freaking out. Just mentioned the place looked familiar. Waited for her to say something normal, something that would make it all make sense. Her reply came quick. She said she liked my place. I stared at that message for a long time. I didn't respond. My brain was trying to piece together how that was even possible. I hadn't told her my address. I barely told her anything about where I live except the general area. There was no way she could have found my exact apartment from that. Another photo came through. This one made my stomach drop harder than anything before. It was my bedroom. My bed, unmade exactly how I left it that morning. My jacket thrown over the chair. Even my charger hanging off the side of the nightstand. And in the corner of the photo, barely visible, was the edge of a mirror. And in that mirror, there was movement. Not clear, not detailed, just enough to see that someone was there holding the phone. I left work early. Didn't even explain it properly. Just grabbed my stuff and went. The whole drive back felt wrong, like I was heading towards something I didn't want to see. I kept checking my phone at red lights. More photos kept coming. Bathroom, closet, my front door from the inside. The last one before I got there was the worst. It was taken from my bed, facing the door. Like someone was laying where I slept. When I got to my building, everything looked normal. Lights on in other apartments, nothing out of place. I stood outside my door for a minute, just listening. Nothing. No sound at all. I unlocked it slowly. The inside looked exactly how I left it. Nothing moved. Nothing missing. Nothing broken. I checked every room. Empty. Completely empty. My heart was still racing, but at the same time I felt stupid again. Like I just worked myself up over nothing. Maybe it was some kind of trick. Maybe someone had photos from before I moved in. I didn't know. I went to my room last. Everything looked the same as in the photo. I sat on the edge of the bed, trying to calm down. That's when my phone buzzed again. I looked at it. It was another photo from her. My hands started shaking before I even opened it. It was a picture of me, sitting on my bed, taken from behind. I slowly turned my head toward the closet. The door was slightly open, just enough to see darkness inside. I didn't move for what felt like forever. I couldn't. My body just locked up while my brain tried to catch up with what I was seeing. My phone buzzed again. Another photo. This time closer. Closer to me. Like whoever was in there had stepped out. I didn't check the closet. I grabbed my keys and left. Didn't pack anything, didn't turn anything off. I just walked out and kept walking until I was outside again. I never went back in after that. I stayed at a friend's place for a while. Told him a watered-down version of it because saying the whole thing out loud made it sound insane. I reported it, but nothing came of it. No signs of forced entry, no fingerprints they could use, nothing missing. Just photos on my phone that I eventually deleted because I couldn't stand looking at them. Her number stopped working the next day. Profile gone too. Like she never existed. I still don't know how she got in. I changed apartments a month later. New place, new locks, everything. But sometimes when I'm at work late, I still get that feeling. Like if I checked my phone at the wrong moment, there'd be a photo waiting. Taken before I got home. Her profile was minimal. Just a single photo that was too dark to make out much, and a short bio that said she liked nighttime walks and coffee at unusual hours. From the start, she refused to meet during the day. Every suggestion I made for coffee or lunch, she declined politely but firmly, insisting that she only went out after dark. At first, I thought it was quirky, maybe some work schedule or weird sleep pattern, but as the dates kept being pushed later and later, a little unease started to creep in. The messages were normal enough, nothing threatening. She asked questions about my life, my habits, my favorite late-night food spots. We traded photos of streets lit by neon signs, empty sidewalks, glowing coffee cups, and the occasional blurry night sky. There was something oddly magnetic about her tone, like she was seeing me in ways that no one else had before. I knew it was dangerous. I knew I should probably stop, but curiosity and that weird excitement of something forbidden kept me agreeing to meet her. We finally arranged to meet up at a park around 11 at night. I remember arriving first, circling the empty lot of the small park with streetlights flickering, the wind carrying a sharp chill. She was already there, or maybe she appeared out of nowhere, standing near a fountain that was more concrete than flowing water, shrouded in shadows. The first thing I noticed was that she didn't blink. Her eyes stayed fixed on mine the entire time I approached, unblinking, unflinching. It was impossible not to feel exposed under that gaze. We walked slowly along the park's winding paths. She moved gracefully, like she belonged there, like the darkness was an extension of her. I couldn't stop staring, and at some point I realized she had no reflection in the puddles scattered along the asphalt. I laughed nervously, thinking it was a trick of the streetlights or maybe my imagination. I stared at her as she reached for her coffee thermos, and the reflection in the water stayed empty. We kept walking. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, at least at first. The park had the quiet of a city asleep, only the occasional distant hum of a car or the faint rustle of leaves in the breeze. Then I saw it. I caught a glimpse of my own reflection in the puddle, and it wasn't there. It wasn't that it looked blurry or faint. It was like the puddle had no knowledge that I existed at all. I froze. She stopped a few steps ahead, turning slightly to watch me. No blink, no change, no expression I could read. Panic started bubbling up, but somehow my feet kept moving, drawing me closer to her as if I had no control. I checked the fountain. Still nothing. Not her, not me. Everything else in the park reflected normally, the streetlights, the trees, the empty benches, but not us. I tried to speak, but my voice felt heavy, like it weighed more than my lungs could carry. She tilted her head slightly, and for the first time, she smiled. It wasn't warm. It wasn't friendly. It was a knowing smile, like she had been waiting for this moment, and I was supposed to understand something I couldn't. The walk continued, and I noticed more details I had ignored before. The way shadows bent differently around her, the way the night felt thicker, like the air itself was trying to pull me into her orbit. It was disorienting. Every streetlight seemed dimmer when she passed. Every reflection that should have existed stayed empty. The panic grew, but there was a strange calm too, a trance-like pull that made it impossible to look away. We stopped at a small bridge. She leaned on the railing and stared down at the water below. No reflection. I forced myself to look into the river, half expecting to see some distortion of myself, some confirmation that I was still here in the physical world. Nothing. The water was clear, smooth, unbroken, empty of me. I tried touching the water. The coldness bit into my fingers, but still no reflection. My panic started turning into terror, but a terrifying curiosity held me there, frozen in place like a moth in front of a flame. The night seemed to stretch, minutes turning into hours. Every step I took beside her felt like a slow erasure. My reflection was gone not just in water, but in the shop windows we passed, and the car mirrors parked along empty streets. She was always just ahead, her smile constant, unwavering. I felt my grip on reality loosening. The city lights flickered, and I realized I couldn't remember what color my hair had been or the exact shape of my hands. The more I focused on her, the more I felt myself melting into the darkness, becoming part of her world. We stopped finally at the edge of an empty plaza. She faced me fully now, close enough that I could see every detail of her unblinking eyes, every subtle movement in her posture, but nothing reflected me back. My stomach churned. I felt hollowed out, as if the world itself was refusing to acknowledge me. She reached out, and instinctively I reached back. The moment our fingers brushed, a strange warmth passed through me, but it wasn't comforting. It was consuming. Time lost meaning. I couldn't tell if we were standing there for seconds or hours. The lights above us flickered, and every shadow seemed to whisper and shift. She smiled, and I felt a pull. I was being drawn into her shape, into her absence. My skin prickled, my thoughts scattered, and I realized that I wasn't just not reflecting. I was becoming like her. Part of the darkness, part of the night itself. Later, when I remember the walk back, it's hazy. The empty streets, the silent bridges, the way the city seemed to fold around us like a blanket. Nothing left a trace of me. No puddles, no mirrors, no windows. I glanced at my phone and the screen reflected only darkness. The screen illuminated my face briefly, but even then it felt wrong. She was always there, always just beyond my peripheral vision, pulling me further into the world she occupied. I got home eventually, though I don't remember the exact moment. The apartment felt different, alien. My reflection was gone in every mirror, even the ones in the bathroom that used to greet me every morning. The glow from my computer, for the little lead strip I had set up along the ceiling, cast shadows, but none of them carried my shape. It was as if I had never been, as if my existence had been rewritten. Sleep didn't help. In dreams, she appeared constantly, leading me through streets I had never walked, cities I had never known. Each time I tried to touch my reflection in the surfaces we passed, and each time nothing came back. I woke up with a hollow sensation in my chest, a gnawing awareness that I wasn't entirely there anymore. I still moved, still spoke, still tried to live a normal life, but everywhere I went my reflection was gone. Friends started asking questions. They noticed oddities, why I never showed up in photos, why group selfies always had a blank space where I should be. I laughed it off, made excuses, but inside, panic bubbled. I could feel the darkness of that night following me, creeping in around edges, waiting for the moment I fully dissolve into it. I don't go out at night anymore. I avoid mirrors, reflective surfaces, water, anything that could remind me of the person I used to be. But even in daylight, in the safest places, I can feel her presence. The pull. The subtle tug at the edges of myself. Sometimes I catch a shadow out of the corner of my eye, standing a few feet away, unblinking, and I know it's her. Guiding me, drawing me closer. Every time, I realize a little more of me is gone, replaced with absence, replaced with night. The last thing I remember clearly is standing in front of a puddle, trying to see myself, and only seeing darkness. A deep, solid, empty black. And her just beyond me, smiling, unblinking, patient. I knew something was off before I'd even met him, but not in a dramatic way. It was more like when you watch a video that looks normal at first, then you replay it and notice something in the background that doesn't match. That kind of off. It started with how weirdly specific he was about the date. Most guys just say something like food or drinks and figure it out later, but he had a full plan laid out like he'd been thinking about it for weeks. Exact time, exact place. He even told me what kind of vibe it would be. He kept saying it would be perfect, like that word mattered more than anything else. I almost didn't go because of that. It felt like too much pressure for a first date, but at the same time I was curious, and he didn't come off creepy in messages, just overly prepared. He picked this small restaurant I'd never heard of. Not in the main part of town either, kind of tucked away down a side street where you wouldn't go unless you were looking for it. He sent me the address and even told me where to park, which I thought was a bit much but still helpful. I remember sitting in my car for a minute before going in, checking my reflection and rereading our messages. Everything still seemed normal enough. When I walked in, it felt quiet in a way restaurants usually aren't. Not empty, just controlled. There were people there, a few tables occupied, but nobody was really talking loud or moving around much. Even the music was low, like it was playing just to fill space. The lighting was warm but kind of flat at the same time, like it didn't change depending on where you stood. He was already there, sitting at a table near the middle. He stood upright when I walked in, like he was waiting for that exact second. Not a second earlier, not late. Exactly when I opened the door. That's when the first weird thing happened. He smiled and greeted me, and it sounded normal, but it also felt like something I'd already heard, like I could predict the tone before he even said it. I brushed it off and sat down. The table was already set with menus, glasses of water, everything arranged perfectly. Too perfectly. Like nobody had actually touched anything. We started talking, and at first it felt okay. He was polite, asked about me, laughed at the right times. But after a few minutes, I started noticing something that made my stomach feel weird. I knew what he was going to say before he said it. Not exactly word for word, but close enough that it felt like I'd heard it already, like my brain was slightly ahead of the moment. I thought maybe it was just because he was predictable. Some people just talk in a way that's easy to guess. I tried to ignore it. Then the waiter came over. He didn't introduce himself or anything, just walked up with his calm expression like he'd been there the whole time. And before he spoke, I knew what he was about to ask. Not just that he'd asked for our order. I knew the exact phrasing. And then he said it. Exactly how I expected. That's when it stopped feeling like a coincidence. I froze for a second, just staring at the table. I didn't want to look at either of them. My heart started beating faster, but I kept trying to act normal because I didn't want to make it awkward over something I couldn't explain. We ordered food. Or at least I thought we did. The weird part is, I don't actually remember choosing anything. I remember looking at the menu, but it felt like my eyes just moved over the words without really processing them. And then somehow the order was placed. The conversation kept going, but it started feeling more and more controlled, like there was a pattern to it that I couldn't break out of. Every time I tried to say something different, something off topic, it just didn't come out right. Like my words adjusted themselves halfway through. He kept smiling the same way, nodding at the same points, reacting like he already knew what I was going to say. The food came out way too fast. And it was exactly what I would have picked if I had actually thought about it. That's when I noticed something else. The other tables. I started paying attention to them, really paying attention, and it hit me all at once. They were doing the same thing. Not the same conversations, but the same patterns. Someone would laugh at a certain moment, and another table across the room would laugh at almost the exact same timing, like it echoed. People would lift their glasses in sync without looking at each other. It didn't look natural. It looked timed. I felt this heavy pressure in my chest, like I needed to get out, but at the same time, I couldn't just stand up and leave. It felt like something was holding the whole situation together, and if I broke it, something worse would happen. I looked back at him. He was watching me in a way he hadn't before. Not smiling anymore, just waiting. And I knew somehow that this was the part where I was supposed to say something specific. I didn't know what it was, but I could feel it, like a blank space in a script that I was expected to fill. I stayed quiet. His expression changed slightly. Not angry, just off. The waiter came back without being called. Again, I knew he was coming before he moved. He set something down on the table. A dessert I didn't order. but I recognized it. Not from real life. From a dream I had a few nights before. I remember waking up from that dream feeling weird because it felt too detailed, like it had a structure instead of random nonsense. And now it was sitting right in front of me. That's when I realized something that made everything worse. This wasn't just planned. It was rehearsed. Like this exact night had already happened somewhere else before I ever got here. I pushed my chair back. That felt like the first real choice I made since walking in. The sound of it scraping the floor was louder than anything else in the room. Everything else stopped. Not gradually. Instantly. Every table, every movement, every sound. Just silence. I stood up. No one moved. Not the waiter, not the people at the other tables, not him. They were all just still. Looking at me. I didn't say anything. I walked toward the door, and it felt like I was moving through something thick, like the air itself didn't want me to leave. But I kept going. When I reached the door and opened it, the outside noise hit me all at once. Cars, people, normal sounds. It felt so loud compared to inside. I stepped out. And right before the door closed behind me, I looked back. Everything inside was moving again, like nothing had happened. People talking, eating, laughing. But none of them looked at me, except him. He was still sitting there, facing the door, watching me. And his expression looked wrong. Not upset. Not confused. Just I had messed something up that was supposed to go a certain way. I left and didn't look back again. Later that night, I checked the app. His profile was gone. Like it never existed. I even searched the restaurant. No website, no reviews, nothing. I went back to the street the next day just to make sure I wasn't imagining it. The building was there. But it wasn't a restaurant. It was empty. Completely empty inside. No tables, no lights, nothing. Just a blank space. I stood there for a while, trying to make sense of it. Then I noticed something on the inside of the glass. A small sign taped to the door. Just one line. Next time, followed the script. I didn't think anything of it at first, which is probably the worst part looking back. It started like every other dumb late-night swipe session when I couldn't sleep and had nothing better to do. I remember I was just laying there scrolling, half paying attention, when her profile popped up. Not even in a dramatic way, just another face in the stack. But I stopped. It wasn't even that she looked unreal or anything like that. She just looked normal in a way that felt rare on those apps. Messy hair in one photo, oversized hoodie in another, sitting on the floor with a coffee cup in one where the lighting was kinda bad. It didn't look staged. It looked real. And yeah, she was pretty, but not in a way that screamed fake profile. I swiped right without thinking much about it. We matched almost instantly. That should have been the first thing that felt off, but it didn't. I just figured she was on her phone at the same time. We started messaging, and it felt easy, like weirdly easy. She didn't take forever to reply, but she also wasn't glued to the chat. The pace felt normal. She didn't ask anything weird either, just basic stuff. What I did for work, what music I liked, dumb little things. I remember feeling like I got lucky for once. After maybe an hour of talking, she asked for my number. I gave it to her. Again, no hesitation. We moved to texting, and that's when things started getting a little strange, but still not enough for me to stop. She started sending photos. Not like anything bad, just random snaps of her day. One of her sitting on her bed with her laptop, another of her holding a mug, one of her shoes, kicked off near a couch. Just casual stuff. It felt normal, like she was trying to make it more real than just texting. I sent a couple back too. Nothing special. Just my desk at work, my car, stuff like that. I work late shifts, so most of this was happening while I was at work. I remember checking my phone during a break when she sent the first photo that actually made me pause. It was a picture of a kitchen. At first glance, it didn't even register. Just a counter, a sink, a kettle. Normal. But something about it stuck in my head. I stared at it longer than I needed to. Then I shrugged it off. A lot of kitchens look the same. I even told myself that while I went back to work. We kept talking. She sent another photo maybe 20 minutes later. This one was of a living room, a couch, a coffee table, a tab on the wall. The lighting looked dim, like it was late afternoon or early evening. Again, nothing crazy. But this time I felt it stronger. That weird feeling like I'd seen it before. I zoomed in on the photo. The table had a scratch in the corner. The couch had this small dent in one of the cushions. I had that exact dent in my couch. I remember just staring at my phone, feeling kind of stupid, like I was trying to convince myself of something that wasn't there. I even opened my camera roll and looked at an old photo I had in my living room. It looked similar, but not exactly the same. I told myself I was reaching. I put my phone away and tried to ignore it. Then she sent another one. This time was a hallway, narrow, with a coat hanging on a hook, a pair of shoes on the floor near the wall. My chest dropped. Those were my shoes. Not just the same kind. Mine, same scuffs on the sides, same worn-out laces. I didn't even realize I'd stopped breathing for a second. I just sat there staring at it while everything started clicking together in the worst way. I went back to the kitchen photo. Then the living room. I started noticing things I missed before. The exact pattern on the counter. The small chip on the wall near the TV. Stuff I'd never paid attention to until that moment. It was my apartment. Every single photo she sent was taken inside my apartment, while I was at work. I remember checking the time. I still had 2 hours left on my shift. My hands felt cold and I couldn't think straight. I wanted to believe there was some explanation that didn't involve someone being inside my place. Maybe old photos. Maybe she used to live there. That was the only thing that made any sense. I asked her about it. I tried to keep it casual, like I wasn't freaking out. Just mentioned the place looked familiar. Waited for her to say something normal, something that would make it all make sense. Her reply came quick. She said she liked my place. I stared at that message for a long time. I didn't respond. My brain was trying to piece together how that was even possible. I hadn't told her my address. I barely told her anything about where I live except the general area. There was no way she could have found my exact apartment from that. Another photo came through. This one made my stomach drop harder than anything before. It was my bedroom. My bed, unmade exactly how I left it that morning. My jacket thrown over the chair. Even my charger hanging off the side of the nightstand. And in the corner of the photo, barely visible, was the edge of a mirror. And in that mirror, there was movement. Not clear, not detailed, just enough to see that someone was there holding the phone. I left work early. Didn't even explain it properly. Just grabbed my stuff and went. The whole drive back felt wrong, like I was heading towards something I didn't want to see. I kept checking my phone at red lights. More photos kept coming. Bathroom, closet, my front door from the inside. The last one before I got there was the worst. It was taken from my bed, facing the door. Like someone was laying where I slept. When I got to my building, everything looked normal. Lights on in other apartments, nothing out of place. I stood outside my door for a minute, just listening. Nothing. No sound at all. I unlocked it slowly. The inside looked exactly how I left it. Nothing moved. Nothing missing. Nothing broken. I checked every room. Empty. Completely empty. My heart was still racing, but at the same time I felt stupid again. Like I just worked myself up over nothing. Maybe it was some kind of trick. Maybe someone had photos from before I moved in. I didn't know. I went to my room last. Everything looked the same as in the photo. I sat on the edge of the bed, trying to calm down. That's when my phone buzzed again. I looked. I didn't notice anything off about Lucas at the beginning because he was exactly the kind of person people describe as easy. Like everything about him felt smooth in a way that doesn't create friction. His profile didn't stand out, but it didn't feel empty either. Just enough there to suggest he had interests, a social life, and some direction without trying to prove anything. And that kind of balance makes it easy to trust someone without thinking about it too much because there's nothing there that raises questions right away. We matched, and the conversation started in a way that felt natural almost immediately, like there were no awkward pauses or forced topics, and he seemed to match my tone perfectly without making it obvious. If I kept things light, he stayed light. If I shifted into something more serious, he followed without hesitation. And at first that just felt like compatibility, like we were on the same wavelength without needing to work for it. When we met in person, it felt exactly the same. He was relaxed, attentive, and didn't try to dominate the interaction. He just adjusted to whatever direction the conversation went in, and that made everything feel comfortable because there was no resistance, no pushback, just a steady flow that didn't require effort. And that kind of ease can make you overlook things because it feels like what you're supposed to be looking for. We started seeing each other more regularly, and that pattern continued. He adapted to everything without making it obvious: my schedule, my preferences, even the way I communicated. And at first it felt like a good thing because there were no disagreements, no tension, nothing that made things complicated, just a consistent sense of alignment that made it feel like we were always on the same page. The first moment something felt slightly off was so small that I almost ignored it completely. I said something about a topic that usually leads to at least some kind of discussion. Not because it's extreme, but because people tend to have slightly different views on it. And instead of responding with his own perspective, he just agreed immediately, not in a vague way, but in detail, like he had already thought about it the same way I had. I remember noticing it for a second before moving on because it didn't feel like a big enough deal to question. But then it happened again. And again. Every time I expressed an opinion, he matched it. Not just generally, but specifically, like he adjusted his wording to reflect mine, even when it didn't feel like something he would naturally say. After a while, it started to feel less like agreement and more like reflection. The turning point came when I noticed a contradiction that didn't make sense. He told me something about himself that directly conflicted with something he had said earlier, not in a small way, but in a way that couldn't both be true. And when I pointed it out, he didn't get defensive or try to explain it in a logical way. He just adjusted his answer to fit the current version of the conversation. That's when it clicked. It wasn't inconsistency. It was adaptation. I started paying closer attention after that, and the pattern became impossible to ignore. The way he spoke, the way he responded, even the way he described himself shifted depending on what we were talking about. Like there wasn't a fixed version of him, just different versions that appeared based on what fit best in the moment. I decided to test it without making it obvious. I brought up a topic I hadn't mentioned before and took a strong stance on it, something specific enough that it would normally lead to at least some kind of disagreement or discussion, and he agreed with me immediately, not just generally but in detail, like he had always thought that way. A few days later, I brought up the same topic again, but took the opposite stance, just to see what would happen. He agreed again. Not hesitantly. Not confused. Just smoothly. That was the moment it stopped feeling like coincidence. There was no consistency. Just alignment. I asked him directly after that, not accusing, just trying to understand how he actually forms his opinions, and for the first time he hesitated, not in a dramatic way, but just enough to show that the answer wasn't automatic. Then he said something that made everything clear. He said he doesn't see the point in holding on to fixed opinions if they create unnecessary conflict. That answer didn't sit right, because it meant he wasn't sharing what he thought. He was choosing what worked. I asked if that meant he changes his views depending on who he's talking to. He didn't deny it. He just said it makes interactions easier. That explanation didn't make it better. It made it worse. Because it meant I wasn't getting to know him. I was getting a version of him. After that, everything felt different. Every conversation, every response, every agreement felt slightly empty, like there was nothing behind it, just a reflection of whatever I had said. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how consistent it had been from the beginning, how he had never disagreed in a real way, never pushed back, never introduced something that felt like it came from him instead of the situation. It wasn't that he was easy to get along with. It was that he removed anything that might cause friction. And in doing that, he removed himself. The final moment for me was when I asked him directly what he actually believes, not about a specific topic, but in general, just asking what his own views are when no one else is influencing them, and he couldn't give a clear answer. Not because he didn't want to, but because there wasn't one. He tried to explain it, saying he prefers to stay flexible, to adapt to different perspectives, but the more he talked, the clearer it became that there wasn't a stable version underneath all of that. Just different versions depending on the situation. That's when it fully settled. There wasn't a consistent person there to understand. Just someone who adjusted to whoever was in front of him. I stopped seeing him after that, not suddenly, not with a big confrontation, just gradually pulling back until there was nothing left, and he didn't question it or try to change anything, which almost made it feel like he had already adapted to that outcome before it even happened. What stayed with me wasn't just that he agreed with everything.